Hey everyone, and welcome to the Distributed Workplace Unboxed, the most exciting event on the future of work, where 14 enterprise leaders will share their insights on overcoming the unique obstacles large organizations face when transitioning to flexible workplace strategies, all in just 2-minute snapshots with one slide. This event will be everything that a webinar is not: engaging, fast-paced, informative, and fun. Today's event is not your typical format. In fact, it's unlike anything you've ever participated in before. Running Remote has carefully handpicked a notable lineup of 14 speakers who will collectively deliver their thoughts in just 30 minutes. So activate that prefrontal cortex and let's get started. My name is Tara Vazdani and I will be your MC for the show today. This event is brought to you by our team at Running Remote that's been empowering the work's transition to distributed work since 2018. The event is powered by Desana, our event sponsor, a platform that simplifies the way companies give their distributed teams access to workspaces anywhere. The Running Remote Premier Conference for remote first and distributed teams welcomes hundreds of companies every year from around the globe for their 3-day live event to discuss the latest strategies and learn from industry leaders on flexible work, company culture, scaling, transitioning, AI, and more. The event brings innovations from enterprise organizations with thousands of employees, many of them working from home. We have hundreds of enterprise participants in the room, many of whom will have burning questions, so please save your questions for the Q&A session to follow after the presentations. Finally, join us at the next conference happening in Lisbon in April 2024 to meet many of the speakers that are present here today. If you stay until the end, we have a special offer waiting for you. And if you're wondering about the recordings, you will all receive them tomorrow. So without further ado, please welcome our first speaker, Phil Kirschner, a senior expert and associate partner at McKinsey & Company with 2 decades of experience shaping the future of work, advising executive teams, and inspiring change through data-driven insights. Phil is a true thought leader in workplace design and employee experience. Let's give a warm virtual welcome to Phil.
Thank you so much. Many companies are embracing flexible working patterns to make things better for their employees, save money on real estate, and be more sustainable. But a McKinsey survey of 50 real estate leaders from truly global corporations found that most are only just getting started on the work that they really need to do. We tested these companies on 12 best practices that have been essential to driving high effort, high value workplace transformations for clients who are really going the distance, meaning like less space, but better performance and happier employees. The good news is that most of them are doing things like asking employees for feedback, using new technologies, and figuring out what moments really matter. But not as many are adapting their real estate portfolio to changes, using cross-functional data to make decisions, or A/B test our rapidly evolving retail-like preferences around work. Even more troubling is how few of those organizations have a dedicated executive for employee experience. They're not documenting how work should be done in a handbook or playbook, and not training their teams to manage by results, or by results instead of physical presence. So to take advantage of the many ideas you're going to hear from the superstars coming after me and make confident, bold moves for improving the workplace and employee experience, we believe leaders at more traditional organizations should be inspired by the remote-first cultures, even if they want most of their employees in the office. We also think that real estate owners and operators have an opportunity to differentiate by helping their clients overcome the challenges of flex and hybrid. That's using advanced analytics to personalize journeys, offering portfolio elasticity, and generally treating their tenants like members. Too many executives are still worrying about days in the office instead of leading the change that they need to. It's going to be hard, but it's well worth the effort.
Thanks, Phil. Next up, we have a true luminary in the remote workspace, Darren Murph. Darren is currently leading technology strategy communications at Ford Motor Company. Recognized as an oracle of remote work by CNBC and featured in the Forbes Future of Work 50, Darren is a visionary in organizational design, having previously served as the head of remote at GitLab, the world's largest all-remote company. Let's welcome Darren Murph, a people-first leader, culture champion, and storyteller, to share his insights on culture in distributed organizations.
I'm going to start by dropping 2 quotes, and then we're going to explore a little bit about how the brain works. Dale Carnegie said that truly respecting others is the bedrock of motivation. And James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, said that you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. When we think about culture, culture is the shared experience that is made up by the lived experiences of those on your team. So saying that another way, you can't create a culture, but you can influence the environment in which culture is built. And to detail that a bit further, I want to explore how the human brain works. After all, if culture is made up of lived experiences from humans on your team, we need to take a look at how their brains work. Dr. David Rock, in his book, Your Brain at Work, has invented the SCARF model. Now, SCARF stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And he posits that in every human experience, you will be moved to threat or reward on these 5 elements. What I want to encourage leaders today is if you're shaping policies, procedures, workflows, anything that could touch culture, make sure that you run it through this filter. Are the changes that you're proposing going to move people closer to a state of threat or reward when it comes to things like status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness? Now, of course, change is hard, and we can't guarantee that every change will be seen as a reward by every person. But knowing how the brain works allows you to get ahead of this. And remember, open dialogue is the key tool to making sure that even if you have to make changes that not everyone will appreciate, that at least have more understanding around it. So with that, go be culture champions, understand the brain more, and remember, open dialogue is the way.
Thank you, Darren. Let's keep the insights going as we welcome our next speaker, Brian Elliott, a co-founder and general partner at McElliott Advisors, LLC, and a senior advisor to BCG, bringing over 25 years of experience as a startup CEO and executive at Google and Slack. An advocate for the future of work, he is also a best-selling author, speaker, and the co-founder of Future Forum. Please join me in welcoming Brian.
Thanks, Tara. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I'm going to talk about the risks of proximity bias and how to mitigate them. So first of all, what is proximity bias? It's the tendency of leaders to show favoritism to employees who show up, who are around them. It's the risk that we provide rewards and opportunities to people on the basis of them showing up, as opposed to on the basis of them actually delivering results. And those risks are real, and they're much more significant for people from historically underrepresented groups at work, because we can see it in the data time and time again over the last 3 years. Flexibility at work disproportionately benefits women, primary caregivers, people who are from different races and ethnicities, people with disabilities, people with neurological differences, and veterans. Plenty of data out there. When people are coming back into the office, some of those risks are also starting to show up because the people who are coming in more often are white, male, non-primary caregivers who are older. Basically, it looks like me. This also shows up in gendered stereotypes at work. If you look at an empty office that Jane occupies, people more often are likely to assume that she is not there for personal or family-related reasons. Whereas if it's Joe's office, people more often are going to assume that it is because of a work-related reason. So given all that, what are we going to do about it? Number one, awareness and education of executives. In Future Forum's research, one of the things we did is we asked executives, what are you worried about when it comes to flexibility? So sharing this data and discussing it with your management team ends up being really important. Number two, digital first workplace guidelines and principles, not mandates, which come from the top. The most important part of that, though, is how do you model behaviors in the C-suite itself? So an example, Slack and Atlassian both did the same thing. We put speed limits on executives. We were told not to come into the office more than 3 days a week because that way we wouldn't be setting the example that we thought presence was really the most important thing. And number three, most importantly, reward outcomes, not attendance. And you can't just say the words. You've actually got to measure the distribution of opportunities, new jobs, cool projects, and rewards and promotions across where people are working and who they are. And with that, we'll move on to the next person.
Thank you, Brian. Next up, we have Kate Lister, the president of Global Workplace Analytics, a powerhouse in the world of flexible and hybrid workplace strategies. A distinguished expert, Kate has testified before the US Congress on the post-pandemic continuation of remote work in government, advised government agencies on remote work, developed various workplace ROI calculators, and co-authored an e-learning course on the case for workplace change that has been licensed by Fortune 1000.
Thank you. So to set the stage for why we need to measure the impact of organizational change, I give you the slightly reworked words of the great philosopher Cheshire Cat. If you don't know where you've been and you don't know where you're going, you'll never get there. Imagine a CFO investing millions of dollars in stocks, but never checking on their performance. It's laughable, right? But organizations do this all the time. They spend millions of dollars adopting new workplace strategies, redesigning offices, rolling out new software. But few could tell you how much or even whether it made things better or worse. And we're seeing this right now in the arguments around hybrid work. You hear business leaders saying it reduces productivity, it impedes innovation, it weakens company culture. But did they actually measure those things? Not any that I've talked to. So they're making multi-billion-dollar decisions on changes that are going to seriously impact their most expensive asset, their people, on feelings, not facts. So how should organizations measure the change of their success of the success of their change initiatives? 3 steps. First, leaders need to agree on what the change is intended to accomplish. Second, they need to define metrics by which the success will be judged. And third, they need to capture those metrics both before and after the effects of the change have settled in, preferably compared to some control group that has not changed. So if the goal was to increase productivity, they might use things like pre and post change cognitive tests. They might look at measures of efficiency and effectiveness. They might look at time lost to distractions or gained. If the goal was to increase innovation, they might measure what science tells us are the precursors to it: network diversity, trust among teams, time to think. It's time we stopped acting on gut feel and used science to truly understand how organizational impacts business and human outcomes. Anything less is as fiscally irresponsible as the CFO we heard from earlier.
Thank you, Kate. Now let's welcome our next speaker, Annie Dean, the global head of Team Anywhere at Atlassian. With a background in remote work leadership at Meta and Deloitte, Annie stands out for her data-driven approach to the work-from-home debate. Advocating for metrics in real estate decisions, she emphasizes that the future of work is not just about where people work, but how. Let's hear from Annie Dean on data-driven real estate.
Hello, everyone. I'm Annie Dean, the Global Head of Team Anywhere at Atlassian. And the first thing I want to clear up is to bust a myth that distributed companies don't care about offices. The office is a really important part of any distributed strategy at scale. Today, executives are feeling a lot of stress about, how to handle these big line items related to their real estate expenses. And it causes many companies to institute return to office mandates. But at Atlassian, we've taken a different dynamic approach, and here's how we did it. First, we created 3 proprietary metrics to understand the business value that our real estate was creating for us and assess its long-term performance. So we look at visitor engagement, cost per visit, and utilization. Visitor engagement helps us understand why employees are visiting a given office so that we can make sure that we're designing a space that serves those needs. And to calculate visitor engagement, we capture frequency data based on Wi-Fi pings and anonymized IP addresses to understand how many people are coming in and how frequently. Note, we don't use badge data because that's shown to be kind of unreliable. The next thing we look at is cost per visit. Cost per visit helps us understand exactly how much it costs in dollars to visit every time somebody visits the office. And to calculate cost per visit, we divide the total cost of operating the office, leasing, food and beverage, staffing, etc., by the total number of employee visits in a quarter. And this helps us understand how can we compare what costs looked like pre-pandemic to post-pandemic, and how can we compare the cost per visit in any given period on a quarter by quarter basis is how we look at things. The third is utilization. So utilization helps us understand value by square footage, which is obviously a really important story to tell in real estate versus just on a dollars basis. So we look at how much square footage is occupied by our visitors, and that helps us understand if we have the right amount of space, if we should scale it back, if we should scale it up. And to calculate utilization, we divide the daily average visits in an office by the capacity of that office, assuming that every person has 150 square feet per person. So using these metrics, you can make 3 key decisions. You can decide to invest in new offices, you can redesign your offices to meet your future needs, and you can expand beyond traditional offices into things like co-working spaces. So long as you have the data, you can make the right choices. Thanks all.
Thanks, Annie. Now let's welcome Nick Bloom, a distinguished Stanford economist with over 2 decades of experience studying remote work and a leading voice providing insights and best practices on working from home. Nick's leadership extends beyond research. He has contributed to policy and public discourse on remote work and consulted with numerous CEOs and managers, guiding them through challenges and opportunities in remote work. Dubbed the prophet of remote work by Fortune magazine and America's best work from home expert by Business Insider, let's hear from Nick Bloom on work from home and productivity.
Yeah, Tara, thanks very much. 2 minutes on work from home and productivity. I'll do my best. It kind of reminds me of my kids' TikTok. So I think for me, the big thing, why there's so much debate, is people confuse 2 very different things. So on the one hand is fully remote, and on the other hand is hybrid. So I'm going to start by just talking about fully remote. There are a bunch of studies on this. I put 4 up here, but there's many more. The numbers they find are really varied. So some of them find like minus 30%. Others are kind of, one I did was find plus 13%. The big reason for the variation is how well this is managed. So if you look at the minus 30% studies, they tend to look at companies that rushed home to remote at the beginning of the pandemic, were disorganized, didn't have much management training, didn't have any systems, and things didn't work out too well. If you look at the plus 13%, it tends to be organizations like, perfect following on from Annie and Darren, like GitLab, Atlassian, that are well organized, have this together. So fully remote can be very productive. You just have to be organized. The other thing I want to point out is it's important to think not so much about productivity, but profitability for companies. So fully remote has another major benefit, is it saves companies a huge amount of money. So firstly, you don't have to pay for overhead, so you're saving about 10% in office space. And secondly, you can hire folks nationally or globally. So for us at Stanford, it's probably saving us 10, 20% to hire people out of the Bay Area, which is very expensive, and hire them in other parts of the US. Hybrid's the other thing. The evidence on hybrid is honestly, it's about flat. It's neither positive nor negative. Or, you could say, look, when I talk to execs and managers, say there's less face time, as maybe people are slightly harder to learn, to connect up, etc. Maybe that's true. Set against that, 2 big upsides. One is you don't have to commute in every day. Saves typical American or European about 70 minutes a day not commuting. So people have more time, they're less tired, they get to sleep more. Secondly, it's actually on average quieter at home. And it seems like, hybrid, these offsets, different effects seem to net out, and it's about 0 on productivity. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Nick. Now let's welcome my good friend, Deetra Giles, Chief Bridge Architect at ExecuPrep, a DEI strategist, CEO maker, TEDx speaker, keynote speaker, and remote work advocate. Deetra has dedicated her life to empowering individuals to define their names, roles, and aspirations. Known as the CEO maker and DEI professor, she shares her formula for helping people transition from I want to be to I am. Let's hear Deetra's insights on how distributed work positively impacts DEI efforts.
So I want you to imagine a castle, stony, gray, mysterious, misty. It's surrounded by walls, but designed for safety. But those same walls keep the magic in and the outside world away. That's our traditional office, a fortress of cubicles, keeping some in and others out. Now, I'm Deetra Giles. I'm the Make It Make Sense queen. And by sense, I actually mean dollars. And the lack of DEIB is a fiscal liability for organizations. So let the numbers speak, and we know numbers reign. So embracing a distributed workforce correlates with a 25% surge in diversity metrics, which can naturally be expected when you make the world your talent pool. But let me get another picture in your mind for a second, just like the castle. This time, it's a genius. IQ 160 developing groundbreaking research, but there's a catch. There's always a catch. Coming to the office is physically prohibitive for them and cost prohibitive for you. Your cubicle moat makes this perfect hire impossible, and so you pass on this talent. But your competitor, who's embracing a distributed workforce, snags them up. And the candidate is Stephen Hawkins. You passed on Stephen Hawkins. You see, companies promoting DEIB in a distributed workforce report better quality hires. It's about creating an environment where everyone's talents flourish. Distributed work not only tears down walls, but also builds bridges to untapped genius. And that is what DEIB is about. When we embrace a distributed workforce, we eliminate barriers and open access to historically marginalized genius that we now reap the benefits both culturally, innovatively, socially, and physically. And it's about what makes sense or actually dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Deetra. Now let's welcome Miranda Zola, a seasoned legal professional with over 20 years of experience, currently posted as general counsel at Oyster. As an international legal design expert, Miranda's building a cross-border employment framework, supporting global expansion and championing remote work by bringing strategic, business-minded solutions to her senior management team. Take it away, Miranda.
Good afternoon. To expand his company globally, our founder spent significant time, not to mention resources, setting up entities, arranging contracts, and finding local benefits. It took so long that they missed out on key revenue, lost competitive candidates, and failed to deliver a great employee experience. It was a real challenge that blocked growth, and that's why he built Oyster to help. While compliance seems like the least exciting thing when you're actually scaling and expanding your business, using compliant hiring practices actually help focus your efforts and can improve efficiency, which in turn will help your company and employees thrive. Here are 4 key ways to unlock your expansion. First, evaluate the type and number of workers your company needs to be successful. The type of work determines if you should focus on contractors, full-time employees, or temporary workers. The number of workers impacts whether you need an entity or not. These baseline checks will help minimize both misclassification and permanent establishment risks. Next, clearly define the necessary job skills and characteristics for the role. Removing all unnecessary qualifications will open up access to that wider talent pool and help you find a perfect candidate. Make sure to set a realistic budget for the position and the location you're hiring to get that candidate. Then, follow a consistent hiring process to ensure candidates are treated fairly and equitably at each step. Ask the same questions and score using the same objective criteria. This not only minimizes bias, it also makes your process faster and more efficient. And finally, understanding local cultural norms and work expectations is crucial for ensuring that you get the most out of an interview, make that competitive offer, and set your employee up for success. Ultimately, when employees trust that they're taken care of, companies see engagement, satisfaction, and retention rise, along with their financial results. So you can navigate these complexities with compliance and an employee-centric approach without slowing your growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. Next up, we have Dart Lindsley, Google's strategic advisor for people experience, who brings a wealth of expertise. Previously, Dart led the Human Resources Transformation Planning and Analysis Organization for Cisco Systems, where he founded both the business architecture and experience design teams. Dart's pivotal insight is a game changer. Employees aren't just inputs, they're customers, and work is the product companies sell to them. This realization prompted Dart to employ marketing and product design tools to uncover what people genuinely seek from work. Get ready for profound exploration of work experience and transformative company strategies with Dart.
Thank you. We have a mistake in our thinking. It's that we frame employees as assets, as resources, as capital, and basically as things that we buy and maintain. And as long as we think this way, we will always turn away from sustained investments in making work that really meets employees' needs, including investments that enable distributed work. If you feel a headwind, that's where it's coming from. And we need to change our underlying mental model if we want to get where we want to go. Employees are not assets. They're customers because they exchange business critical value with our companies and are free not to. That's the definition of a customer. So all companies are therefore multi-sided. That's a business model change. We have two customers, each of whom needs to be satisfied in order to satisfy the other. And one of those customers is the people who work for our companies. Work is therefore a product that employees subscribe to. And we can use practical tools from market research and product design to make that work experience better. And that includes product lines of work. And I think this is something that's been very confused as we've gone to hybrid and beyond. It might be nomadic as a product line, hybrid, on-prem, remote, but it's a product line. And Toyota, for instance, doesn't say, we're a sedan company, so we're just going to make trucks that are just okay. Trucks are not an afterthought. Companies like Toyota commit to building a product line in which every product in the line is best in class. And that's how we should be thinking about work. And I'll pass it on.
Thank you, Dart. Next up, we have my dear friend, Laurel Ferrer, founder of Distribute Consulting, a leading virtual organizational development think tank and consulting firm. With over 15 years of expertise, Laurel is an internationally renowned thought leader in remote work, collaborating with top businesses and governments. Her focus includes converting operations to virtual, developing products for remote work markets, and leveraging flexibility for global solutions. Let's hear from Laurel.
Thank you, Tara. All right, virtual organizational behavior. Let's break it down. If your distributed team is feeling disconnected, it could be because you're sharing just enough information with each other to complete tasks, but not sharing enough behaviors with each other in order to be working in the same way. If you think about it, when we're in person, we tend to naturally subconsciously mirror each other's behaviors. Psychologically, this is called limbic synchrony, which just means that the more time we spend around other people, the more that we're going to act and think like them. So if we're not in close proximity to our team members, does that mean that we can never achieve that limbic synchrony? No, of course not. As with all things remote work, we just need to communicate in a slightly different way. So without the benefit of nonverbal communication readily accessible, it's important to make implicit performance expectations explicit so that everyone can easily know what those are, they can recognize them, and they can mirror them. The best virtual first companies provide this training through documentation instead of through observation. So in best practice, this documentation exists in 3 different levels of team agreements. First, you need to agree on the legal policies of flexible working. According to local and federal laws, what are the bare minimum requirements needed for making offsite work possible? This is your remote or hybrid working policy. Next, you'll need to make an agreement about how your collective work will be managed in an operational plan. This answers the infamous question, how do I know if you're working if I can't see you, right? This is especially important for hybrid teams to prevent the proximity bias that Brian was talking about. Finally, you will be able to supplement all of that collaboration with connection when you agree on cultural expectations in a communication charter. This is the secret sauce. This is where you're going to see that limbic synchrony come to fruition because you'll all be making decisions and sending messages and participating in meetings and giving feedback in the same way. These 3 agreements are how your team can finally come together without actually being together.
Thank you, Laurel. Now let's welcome the founder and chief bot at MeBeBot, Beth White, who is ardently dedicated to enhancing productivity in enterprise environments. With a passion for freeing up time to focus on meaningful work, Beth created MeBeBot, an AI intelligent assistant and platform for the enterprise. Get ready to discover the future of AI for enterprise companies with Beth.
Thank you, Tara. And Nick, I hear you, 2 minutes to talk about AI. That's a tough one, right? But let's dive on in, and we're going to talk about how you all can empower yourselves and your people within organizations by leveraging AI from the whole talent life cycle. Starting with talent acquisition, as Deetra mentioned, it really does break down a lot of geographic and global barriers. We can source and screen talent from multiple different countries, different areas of the world, and even language backgrounds. Even using some of the video conferencing tools out there, we're able to translate languages. That really helps us to get to know people and bring different types of folks into our organizations. Additionally, with AI, we're leveraging it to actually onboard candidates into the employee experience. And when we do that, we can help support their needs. We're leveraging AI chatbots like MeBeBot that helps automate answers to commonly asked employee questions, sending communications and pulse surveys to help keep the finger on the pulse of the people that are out there. Even if they're not in your vicinity, we're using this technology to keep employees close. And then we're layering on top of it to help us develop the organization and the people. The AI has a lot of power to absolutely learn about employees, learn what kinds of career direction they want to go down, and help match them to different opportunities within inside the organization. It really pulls it all together, leveraging people analytics data. We start to expose a dashboard that can bring in various different types of data points so that you can see a more holistic view of your organization using different types of information you may not have had access to before. And then to hit on another factor that Deetra mentioned, AI can be the great equalizer. It can help reduce biases that are out there with inside organizations when used appropriately. So you cannot help but think about AI needs people and human in the loop to train AI, and having a diverse workforce and educating people and upskilling them to learn AI helps the overall business compliance security of what we need in workplaces today. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Up next is Larkin Ryder, a seasoned professional with over 25 years of experience in solving complex problems in security, quality assurance, and customer support in high-tech companies, including Twitter and Hewlett-Packard. Today, Larkin is the Senior Director of Product Security at Slack. While her current passion lies in information security, Larkin's extensive career has spanned various engineering sectors, providing her the opportunity to contribute to all levels of the management chain. Get ready for insights from Larkin, whose wealth of experience brings a unique perspective to the challenges of cybersecurity.
Thanks, Tara. So glad to be here. All right, today we've heard many great reasons to enable remote work, and cybersecurity is not a blocker. Yes, we do say that physical access is total access, and with distributed work, the security team has no control of the physical places where work happens. But remote workers are knowledge workers, and securing the digital work environment is, of course, possible. All right, let's understand the threats. FBI cybercrimes data shows a significant jump in complaints between 2019 and 2020 with the onset of remote work. And there has been an ever-increasing year-over-year financial impact over the last 3 years of these attacks. Phishing continues to be the most common type of attack, which happens anywhere email is used. These attacks put the worker and their laptop at the center of our remote first security program, which requires mature digital solutions to replace in-office collaboration. Providing these best-in-class cloud-based productivity services is essential for scaling remote work securely. And these great services will have things like ISO 27000 certifications, GDPR compliance statements, and other trust indicators right on their website sites. Look for those. Those are a guarantee that they'll have things like multi-factor authentication, up-to-date encryption standards, automated ways to manage retention and deletion of data. Be sure to ask any service you want to work with for the results of a recent and independent penetration tests. These cloud-based services also have to provide you the security features in their products so that you can manage the interaction of your knowledge workers with that service in a way that aligns with your threat landscape. So those mature services will let you control the way mobile devices will interact with cloud-hosted data. They will allow you to see suspicious activity on employee access requests and give you options for automated response to those. They will integrate with data loss prevention and single sign-on providers that you're already using. Our IT and security teams are also transforming themselves to support remote work with a focus on protecting these employee devices. And to be effective, they may do things like deploy advanced endpoint protection and response, use DNS firewalls, monitor privileged and unusual activity, configure short inactivity lock times. They may require employees to use a password manager, or better yet, use WebAuthn. Finally, a secure workforce is an engaged workforce. Check in on the job satisfaction of your workers. We've heard all kinds of great suggestions about how to do that today. Make room for the concerns of the workers themselves. Hey, they are not your asset, right? They're your customer. Make time and space for workers to connect in person. That human connection is an important part of an effective security program. Thank you.
Thank you, Larkin. Now, let's welcome our next speaker, Michael Cockburn, co-founder at Dasana, a platform revolutionizing the way that companies provide workspace access to their distributed teams. Dasana works with some of the largest and most innovative companies in the world, such as GitHub, Dropbox, and Elastic, to assist them with transitioning to workspace strategies that are better for people, better for business, and better for the planet. Get ready for insights on asset-light offices.
Thank you so much, Tara, and thank you everybody for having me. I'm here to talk about the age of asset-light offices. I'm actually here to talk about the dysfunction that can come from retrofitting workplace policy back from financial commitment to offices versus back from the needs of the business and the people and the planet. So what I mean by asset-light offices is now we have the ability for companies to pay for the space that has been used by their employees versus paying for the ability to use space. I'm going to give you a practical example of that from the wonderful folks at Dropbox we work very closely with, and just one of the cities of the 250 cities that they use workspace on demand. I'm going to pick out New York City. They had an office in New York City, cost them over 100 grand a month. They had about 20 employees actually using that office, talking about cost per visit. That's a horrific stat on that one. They transitioned to workspace on demand, and yet they now have 100 people in New York City using a network of different flexible workspaces on demand, and a spend of around 30 grand. We see cost savings between 60 and 90% from going from this fixed cost based on the ability to use to a variable cost based on use. But the value is much, much deeper than that for businesses. Because it's all curated and delivered through a technology platform, companies are able to streamline the way they optimize and configure their workplace policies, implement their strategy, measure and iterate their strategy back from the needs of their people, their business, and the planet, or any data points that they care about. So we think that the age of asset light is upon us, and it's going to change this industry for the better, for the right stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Finally, let's welcome our final speaker, my friend Dave Cairns, Senior VP of Office Leasing at CBRE Canada. With a focus on high-growth tech companies, space as a service operator, and financial services, Dave brings extensive experience in navigating the evolving landscape of office leasing needs. As a futurist in the office market, Dave passionately advocates for the importance of delivering space as a service. Get ready for insights into community building in the metaverse from Dave.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, I'm going to go deviate from office and get into something new. All right, so I'm here to discuss gathering intentionally in a virtual world. Just like the physical world, space only has life because of people. But it can't just be warm bodies. There needs to be purpose behind it. So how are we bringing purpose to a virtual world? We're doing it through a conversation series called Inspired People, Inspired Places. We're conducting deep roundtable discussions on the future of work, living, our relationships to each other, holding the simple yet what I think beautiful belief that wherever there is human consciousness colliding, it's an inspired place, period. I want to go deeper on how we meet this way, but first I want to clarify that our immersive meetings do not require VR goggles. We make this format accessible through desktop software or a web browser streaming service. So now that that's clarified, I think it is obvious to all of us that the pandemic has exposed shortcomings in the way that we gather. But the bright spot to all of this is that we're actively seeking out solutions, and virtual worlds offer incredible possibilities that very few are considering. Number one, we can foster safe spaces for creativity and deep conversation. As the moderator myself, along with our amazing speakers, we've been able to take risks and discover surprising insights that wouldn't have necessarily emerged in person or on Zoom. Number two, we can activate parts of our brain and our humanity that often can be challenging. At our first IP community, so as we first started, we were meeting in sort of an assigned seating format that felt more like a classroom. Now we sit around a virtual table and experience a new definition of breaking bread. Number three, the possibilities exist to recreate in-person experiences, like closing the doors to a meeting space before it happens, to encourage those cherished before moments that many rightfully feel has been lost in a remote world. Number four, power dynamics can melt away when avatar to avatar. Everyone gets immersed and is on the same playing field. And if you've been to one of our events, it's really quite powerful, and the experience is kind of felt by all. Number five, all of a sudden, we might hear from people that often choose to stay quiet. Virtual worlds can empower individuals who may feel uncomfortable or unable to express themselves in traditional formats. At the end of the day, IPIP aims to reignite creativity and imagination while infusing a new type of fun into gathering at a moment that may be arguably stale. So to close, I just want to urge you to keep an open mind. I'd love to see you at one of our future sessions. You may love it, you may hate it, but the whole point of this inflection point is to approach things with a beginner's mind. And with that, I am going to end this whole thing on a very cheesy note and end with a quote by the Zen master Shunryu Suzuki. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. All right, folks, that's a wrap on our speakers. It's time now for the Ask Me Anything. Ask your questions by typing them in the Q&A tab in the menu. If the question is for a specific speaker, please specify them in your question. I'll jump to our first question in the chat, which comes in, in the Q&A tab, which comes in from Sophie Wade. Sophie says, to Phil's point, what are other speakers' experiences on how many CEOs or companies are focused on adapting to hybrid versus adapting to redesigning work itself, with location just being one element of the bigger future of work picture? And for companies where they are now thinking more broadly, what are they prioritizing and why? And I'd like to call to the stage Brian Elliott. I think he may be able to answer this question.
Hey, Tara. I suspect many of our other panelists would give you similar answers. It's a great question. It's an important topic. I had this conversation with a government public sector leader last night, actually, who was saying, hey, look, part of our challenge is even if we're trying to do team agreements, we're just focused on the place question. And it feels like it might just be a check the box exercise, a set and forget and not really go anywhere. So what we talked about is, like, if you think about this more broadly, if you go beyond the concept of how many days a week somebody needs to be in the office, and you think about how your team actually operates, team level agreements are about the norms and practices, and they get into a lot more important topics like how do you use your time and the meetings burnout that people are associating with themselves. So I'll drop an example in the chat, but if you read the team agreement that the Future Forum team built now 2+ years ago, plus the ones from Atlassian, plus the ones from Laurel and a lot of other people here, place is very seldom mentioned. It's all the other stuff that you have to figure out as a team about how you operate, not just where you do it.
Thank you so much. And we've got a second question in on the chat. This one is from Yenislava Kristova. She says to Laurel, who is in charge of creating the work agreements in an organization? Are they standardized or up to the company choice to structure the guidelines as they see need? How often are they typically revised and updated?
This is a really great question. As with all things business, it's really going to be subjective to your culture. What we want to see is a cross-functional agreement. So making sure that both the people team and the operations team have a chance to review and approve the terms. This can be done by the executive team. This could be done by the HR group. This could even be done by an independent contributor who drafts something up and sends it to the executive team for approval. Who drafts it does not matter as much as who adopts it. So make sure that all of the departments in your entire company are aware of what these terms are and how they need to be involved, specifically with first steps and implementing these behaviors on a daily basis. In terms of maintenance, the same point of contact should be responsible for maintaining it.
Perfect, thank you. And I'm going to throw my 2 cents in there. Make sure that those agreements comply with your local legislation. That's just, your lawyer commenting over here. Thank you, Laurel. The next question comes in from Jonas Westverlin. Jonas says, working with a global healthcare company on a new HQ for 800 persons. 200 cannot work from home. They work in laboratories. 600 use hybrid. Question, how to not get a gap over time between the employee types? Do we have any speakers that would be willing to answer this question? All right, looks like Phil Kirschner will take a crack at it.
Well, no one can see me and I can't unmute my video. So if somebody wants to turn me back on that, oh, there we go, start my video. Here we are. I think the question means about sort of like first and second class citizens. And the story that I share when I'm asked this often is that like, we all have different kinds of jobs. We had different kinds of jobs before. There have even been like public interviews with Amazon fulfillment center workers who are like, I'm not in accounting. Like the fact that their job is different than my job, like that predates COVID. And all we're really seeking is like personalized and distinct employee experiences. So the answer is like, understand who your employees are, pick the areas that you want to be truly distinctive around the employee experience and figure out how to like personalize that for different people's contexts. If someone who has like a very hands-on job doesn't want that, like, I'm sorry, the answer is like, you don't have to make other people in the same company work like them for the same reason, because those people will leave immediately for any number of other jobs that are similar to the way that they're working or their peers in other firms are working that are available to them flexibly remotely. Like that's a losing battle. I'd love to hear from anyone else if you want to add.
Hey, Phil, good answer. One of my favorite quips comes from a CHRO of an industrial company. When the CEO said, it's not fair because our warehouse operators are working in the warehouse all day long, that our office folks don't have to go into the office. Her line back to him was, so you're after fairness. Are you giving them access to the corporate jet as well? These are different roles with different needs and different things that are behind them. It turns out this concept of flexibility matters just as much to frontline workers, though, as it does to office workers, but they need it in different formats. So if you survey them and ask them, what they'll talk about is the ability to swap shifts. They'll talk about fractional shifts. They'll talk about more control over when they're showing up to work. And if you do that, by the way, what you get is access to more talented people on the front line as well. And these days, frontline worker access and retention is actually a much bigger deal than office worker retention. So, thinking about this from an equity versus equality perspective, what we need to do is invest in flexible work programs for every type of worker. But those different types are going to have different types of programs that are going to fill their needs.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian. Now, I've got a question from Michael Cockburn at Dasana. This one comes in from Michelle Cleverden. In an asset-light strategy and on demand, how do you ensure the same standard of employee experience? With fluid options, not all service providers are created equally and offer the same quality of space and workplace technology.
Thanks for the question, Michelle. The answer is curation on the way in the rollout of the platform. So as I was trying to address in the 30 seconds or 2 minutes to get a point across, you know, a big part of the rollout of this kind of solution is the work at the front end, the change management, the communication to the teams, and the alignment with policies and standards of the business. So, for example, in London, you may want to filter out certain types of space and go for a higher quality offering that aligns with what your space policies are and what your standards are as a company. In certain other markets where you're meeting distributed employee needs, we've just gone live in Zambia. The standard in Zambia is very different from central London, right? So, you know, you might want to, you know, you might have to kind of lower the requirement for that market for the 8 employees that you might have there. So that's the short answer to that question.
Thank you so much. Now, I've got a question here from Nick Bloom. Nick, can you say how companies are typically measuring productivity in the studies you cite? Thanks, Craig.
Great, thanks for your question. You know, it varies dramatically. So I have to say the types of setups where it's very appealing to do remote, it's easy to measure. So think call centers, you know, data entry, HR, kind of, you know, payroll, etc. In these setups, it's really easy to measure productivity. And in many ways, this is a perfect setup for remote, or certainly hybrid. It gets much harder in the types of more creative industries. Think of, you know, more graduate roles. You know, Laura, this connects very much back to what Laura was talking about earlier, that it's important to have performance metrics and think about them. So in some of the studies I've done, you know, it's going to be output documents. Well, I used to work in McKinsey long ago. I didn't overlap with Phil, but, you know, we were assessed on various metrics. The other thing I want to highlight is, I think the question ultimately is on profitability rather than productivity. And I think this plays very much to remote workers. So I often have this discussion with execs who will say they'll worry maybe about some productivity outcome, but you point out that, look, remote workers are dramatically cheaper because you don't have to pay for overhead costs for them, and you can hire nationally or globally. And, you know, you're getting more diversity, you're getting better talent for your dollar. And so ultimately, in many ways, the business question is going to be on profitability, and that skews heavily towards favoring remote and hybrid.
Thank you so much.
So and it is a hard question. Sorry, this is like the $64,000 question. Generally, measuring productivity at an individual level is pretty tough in many circumstances.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nick. Now, I've got a question for Beth White. This one comes in from Peter. How do we get people to understand the blessing of asynchronous work instead of getting choked by meetings? Online, there's always a free conference room.
Absolutely. And that is the difficulty today, is there's so many ways that we can collaborate within the different tools like Slack and Teams, and everybody is challenged to find time and day in their lives. And that's where really you'll start to see, you know, over the coming years, more frankly, there's an app for that. So there's going to be some different types of ways to help us all keep focused and not get too burnt out on the different types of, you know, solutions and tools. And it may seem counterintuitive, but yet there are opportunities to take advantage of that. So meaning, instead of actively looking for information, having information curated and pushed to you. And I believe that's really going to be what's going to be shaping a bit of the world, where we're going to be able to pull people together. And again, excited to see some of the ways that we can communicate to people that have native language differences, right? So that's going to, again, I think, help spur more community. And there's always new opportunities, and would love any suggestions others have on how they're doing that today.
Thank you so much, Beth. And I believe we've got time for one more question. This one comes in from Miranda. Miranda, how can companies protect themselves from misclassification risks when it comes to how they work with contractors? And I'll definitely jump on that after you're done.
There are a handful of ways that you can think about this, but I think the first one is really just to understand, like, what is the work that they're doing? If they're doing work that can be done independently, that can be done whenever they want it, how they want to do it, and that they maybe can do it for other folks, then they're probably going to be a contractor. If you need to actually manage the work that they're doing, if they're replacing a resource that perhaps is out on leave, these are things that tend to indicate that they are not a contractor. And while rules are going to certainly vary from country to country, there are some sort of hard and fast rules, and those are how much agency they have on there, how they work, and when they work. So these are just some high level items, but things to start with.
I totally agree with you. So, in Canada and much of the US, we've got, certain factors according to the case law that will tell you whether or not this was an employee or a contractor and what your obligations or liabilities are. And so in Canada, we had a great case that went all the way up to the Supreme Court of Canada for Uber drivers who were actually found to be employees under the law. And so there was severe back pay that Uber had to take care of to the Canada Revenue Agency. We always advise our clients to really figure out, what relationship would be the most advantageous for them and work with the employee from there. If the employee has the opportunity to, for example, work for several companies at a time, they may just agree that they're a contractor, and you're never going to end up in a situation where all of a sudden you have to think about any sort of challenge to that arrangement. On the flip side, if you're trying to just slap a contractor title on the agreement, but everything points towards being an employee, you set the hours of work, you provide the tools and equipment, you set the job duties and responsibilities, you're probably going to be found to be an employee. So I'm totally with you there. It's all about the factors. And thank you so much, Miranda. So everyone, that's all the time we've got for questions today. As an extension of the Running Remote Conference taking place in April, we have officially launched the Enterprise Academy on day one of the conference in Lisbon, a laser-focused day for distributed-friendly multinational companies implementing workplace flexibility strategies. Ticket prices increase on December 15th, so get your teams on board and see you there. Hopefully, you've captured insights today and practical steps on executing a successful workplace flexibility strategy together with your team. If you are ready for a deeper commitment to workplace flexibility, the Enterprise Academy is the ideal place to get more of this type of content personalized to your company. The Enterprise Academy is curated by Brian Elliott, co-founder at Future Forum, Kate Lister, president at Global Workplace Analytics, Rosie Sargent, project leader at Boston Consulting Group, and my dear friend Sasha Connor, CEO at Virtual Work Insider. Get 2 for 1 if you purchase the Enterprise ticket in the next 7 days. More to come in the email you will all receive soon. Stay tuned.